How are you doing this morning? Good. Happy to be here? Good. I'm happy to be here too. Now, I'm not even sure how to get started other than to say, I'm Denise Jacobs. I'm going to be talking about white space creativity. You know where you are. I apologize for the kind of lack of contrast. I was thinking that it was going to be so much more contrasty-er. That's a technical term, by the way. And if you want to tweet, my Twitter handle is Denise Jacobs, #GenerateConf, and if you want to use a hashtag for this, it's whitespaceCreate. Can you read that? Like, seriously? Okay, good. I was like having like a fit this morning, like, they can't read it, oh my god, I'm horrible. And if you want to get the slides are at bit.ly, generate whitespace. So, having said all that, just to tell you a little bit about myself, some of you may know me as kind of my former entity as the author of the CSS Detective Guide and a CSS person and CSS3 and all that stuff. And so you may be saying, wait, what? You're a creativity evangelist? What does that even mean? Not only actually am I a creativity evangelist, but I am now the founder and chief creativity evangelist of my creativity consulting firm called The Creative Dose, which I'm super excited about. But I got into this because, to me, I feel like creativity is a really important skill to have. It's something as web designers and web developers we're always using, but it's one of those skills that's almost like we don't exactly know how we tap into it. We don't exactly know how we get into it, into the zone, but when we're there, it's amazing, right? It's great. But it's that kind of elusivity of it, that kind of intangibility of it, where it's like you wish you could replicate it over and over again. And so I want to talk about some kind of unconventional ways that you can actually use to get into a creative zone more easily. And also, by the way, because I started my business, I kind of feel like this all the time, like, woo! So you'll excuse me if I'm overly exuberant today. So I want to talk about the state of the create, kind of the canvas of what we're working with. Now, this actually involves participation from your part. When you feel like you're in the creative zone, what does it feel like? Somebody give me something. What does it feel like for you? Don't make me call you out, because I will. I'm American. I've got no shame. Everything flows. What else? I'll call on you. You in the blue shirt, blue jacket. She's like, me? Yeah. You, yes, you, because you stepped up. Don't fight over it. Yeah. Scared? Really? What are you scared? What are you afraid of? Right, but when you're in it, not when you're trying to start, when you're like, reaching for it, but when you've actually grabbed it and you're in the zone, what does it feel like? Feel confident. Great, everything flows, you feel confident. One more over here. Don't make me, Jeremy, I'm gonna call you because I know you'll talk. Yes! Timeless, right? You lose time. You're just in the flow, and then you look down, and then you look up, and 5 hours have passed, and you forgot to eat, and you forgot to use the bathroom, and you didn't care about who called you, right? You were just in it. So, I like to think of this as a form of magic in some ways, like a form of alchemy, that when we're in the creative zone, it's like we're alchemists ourselves, that we're taking this unformed, untangible thing, we're taking it and we're moving it through ourselves like a semi-permeable membrane, and then it comes out into the world as this tangible, fully formed something, concept, app, website, writing, whatever it is, right? It feels like magic, but it's not magic. It's just magical. By the way, if you've never watched this TED Talk, Your Brain on Creativity, Your Brain on Improvisation, it's amazing. You should totally watch it. So what happens is, kind of like she says, what happens is a lot of times we get blocked. Right? We're trying to get into that creative flow, or we're trying to reach it, and instead you're just there like grasping for straws, not catching it. And we have this amazing tool. We have our brains. as this amazing creative tool. And we also have the tools of kind of time and attention and focus. But what happens is that we often don't really know how to properly use these tools. And therefore, that's what happens, which makes us run into these roadblocks. And so then when we run into roadblocks, we can't really access all of the great ideas that we have in our head as well as we would like to. And so I want to talk about creativity and power, because I actually think that in some ways there is a power dynamic. Now, we're all creative people here, and I'm not even going to do a show of hands of people who think they are and who think they aren't. You can kind of keep that, and you can kind of think about that on your own. But we're all actually really powerful in terms of being creative, and in terms of creativity. We all have our own kind of intrinsic, unique ways of being creative. But instead of actually using this power fully, I feel like a lot of times we contain it. We try to downplay what we're good at. You know, somebody will say, oh, you know, are you good at so-and-so? Yeah, I'm okay. You know, I dabble in a little bit of web design, web development. Yeah, I'm all right, you know. But we try to contain this power. Or even worse, we give it away, right? We like totally will ignore what our creative gifts are. And that's most unfortunate. And so the question is, how can we make it better? We give our power away by doubting ourselves. How can we make this better? Now, the other thing is that we've got these kind of distractions, these distraction complications going on. And one of the things is that when you're really creative and you're in the creative zone, actually, you're not really focused outside of yourself, are you? You're really focused in on yourself, and you're really focused in on whatever it is the idea is and bringing that to the fore. But what ends up happening instead is that a lot of our lives and a lot of the way society is structured is that our attention is focused outward, right? A lot of times, and I know it's ironic that I'm here at a web conference and people may be tweeting. You guys actually are all listening very well. It doesn't look like anybody's looking at their phones. But a lot of times we're like addicted to hyperconnectivity, right? On our phones all the time, tweeting, texting, looking for emails, et cetera, when we're not actually being present to what's happening in front of us. And there's actually, when I say we're addicted, I actually mean we're addicted. Have you guys seen the study or heard about the study where they take the rats, they put them in a cage, they give them a lever? Yeah? No? Ring a bell? They give them a lever, the rat hits the lever, they get food. Every time they hit the lever, they get food, and then they switch it up. And then it happens intermittently. Sometimes they get food, sometimes they don't get food. What they found out is that the rats get a little squirt of dopamine in their brains every time the food comes, every time the reward comes. And then when it doesn't come, they want that squirt of dopamine, so they keep hitting the lever. So if you've ever been to a casino, you see humans doing a similar situation. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little addicted to email. And there have been times when I've sat and hit the refresh button on Gmail to see if something's coming in. Like, is it no, now? How about now? How about now? Because I'm addicted to that little squirt of dopamine, that little jolt that I get that when I get an email, like, oh, and of course I never want to deal with it, but I still want to see it. Jonathan Fields, who wrote a book called Uncertainty, talks about hyperconnectivity, and he says that it gives us the perception of getting more done, and it makes us feel like we're getting more, that we're doing more because we're using every free moment of every waking hour. But the question is that the most effective things? These distractions actually start to affect the way our brains work. There's something called the Cigar effect, and that basically comes down to our brains are actually kind of formed to start to work on a task and start to do it, and then what happens is if you truncate that task, if you interrupt it, then that cycle mentally is still happening in the background. You can imagine it like a computer processor. You stop a process, it keeps running and it kind of keeps hanging, and you start another process, that goes, you stop that one keeps hanging. And then at the end of the day, you wonder why you feel overwhelmed, you feel tired, you didn't get anything done. I would argue also that in some ways we have this hyperconnectivity and we get into all of these distractions because we're actually afraid of this creative power that we have, right? And that's why we're kind of all over the place. Now, I think that we can channel this power. And what if the way to channel this power isn't about thinking and it isn't about doing so much? It's more about something else. So, I offer to you that genius and creative genius is the offspring of the in-between. And so let's talk about how we're going to get that. So, clarity. How are we going to get some of this clarity? How are we going to leverage this in-between space, get away from being hyper-connected and getting away from being distracted all the time so that we can really start to harness this creative power? Now, what we're trying to do here is actually maximize what our brains do naturally to be creative. Now, one of the things I think is really interesting about creativity, when people think about it, they think about it as this kind of fluffy, kind of nebulous, tenuous process. But the fact of the matter is that we've got these brains, and our brains are doing something kind of all the time. And there is actually some certain neurological processes that go on when we're being creative. And so a lot of times when people talk about creativity and brains, they always talk about right brain, right? Right brain versus left brain. That the left brain is linear and logical and sequential and analytical, etc. And that the right brain is instead kind of holistic and random and intuitive and nonverbal, etc. But the fact of the matter is that when your brain's working well creatively, it's when it's integrated. It's when the right side of your brain and the left side of your brain are actually working together well in concert. It's about your neurons firing well. But the thing is that when you're distracted and when you're hyperconnected and when you're all over the place, frankly, is your brain working well at that point? She's like, no, it's not. A couple will be like, wait, it's not. It's not. It's actually stress and things like that actually cause your brain to fire improperly and not very well. The other thing that we can take into consideration is brainwaves, and you can't even see any of the text there, for heaven's sakes. But so there are different kinds. You guys familiar with brainwaves? How many of you are familiar with brainwaves? Show of hands. Yes? No? Okay. For those of you who aren't, 5 different kinds of brainwaves. Going to skip gamma. I'm going to go straight to beta. So beta is kind of normal, everyday focus, everyday kind of concentration when you're being analytical, when you're logical, when you're processing something. When you're externally focused, you're usually in beta brainwave mode. Alpha brainwave mode is that wonderful place when you're starting to feel relaxed, when you're starting to fall asleep, for example, or when you're waking up, when you take a walk, when you take a nap, when you take a shower, when you're meditating, for example. Anybody meditate here? A few people, yeah? Okay, with you. Meditators unite. So often you will get into alpha brainwave mode when you're meditating. Theta is the lower brainwave underneath that. Usually when you go into a deep sleep, usually dream sleep, if you're a very experienced meditator, you can go into theta brainwave mode at will. And then delta is the lowest and the slowest. And that's usually when you if you've ever had one of those nights where you slept so well that you felt completely rejuvenated and refreshed afterwards when you woke up, or you felt like I slept the sleep of the dead. Right? That deep, deep level, that's actually where your brain actually your body starts to rejuvenate itself. You go into a super conscious state where you kind of feel like you're connected with everything if you're kind of somewhat conscious during that period of time. And then finally, at the top, gamma brain waves are usually really, really fast. Also, what happens a lot of times when you're in crisis, when people say they had a kind of a traumatic experience and they remember everything that happened at the time, even though it might have been within the period of seconds. And then it also precedes an aha moment. So a lot of times your brain will go into this like really fast moment when all your neurons start firing and connect together to make a new idea. And then we'll usually go down into alpha brainwave mode. Now, alpha is my kind of personal favorite because it is the easiest one to get into from being focused and concentrated, and it is often referred to as the gateway to creativity. It is where creative ideas usually come from. How many of you guys have had a really good idea in the shower? Admit it. You know, it's like, don't feel bad, because like almost everybody universally will say that. And that's probably because you were in alpha brainwave state, you were relaxed, your brain kind of relaxed, and then it got, and all of the information that was in your left brain was able to be accessed by your right brain and put together in a new way. So, you guys want to try it for a moment? You willing to indulge me? Okay. I can see all of you, by the way. So if you don't close your eyes, I will see you. Close your eyes for a few minutes. I can see all of you. He's like, oh, he's looking around like, oh, she caught me. So close your eyes, and I want you to just breathe. Just breathe through your nose. If you can, and you don't have to force this, just rest your tongue at the roof of your mouth. And just breathe and just let your shoulders fall away from your ears. We're here at the beginning of the conference. It's real mellow. And just keep breathing. Just keep breathing. Let your thoughts settle. Just keep breathing. Breathe a little more. Great. Okay, come on back to the room. Some people are always like, oh, it was so nice. If you felt your brain start to settle from being a little kind of frenzied to start to settle down, she's like, yeah, I did. You started to experience your brain moving from alpha brainwave mode, from beta brainwave mode into alpha brainwave mode. Now, the thing that's really interesting about this is that, I love this, Tina Seelig wrote a book called Ingenious. And she says that the part of the brains, this is what happens when you're creative. The parts of your brain that are responsible for self-monitoring start to turn off when you're creative. And that's part of the trick. So let's talk about some ways that you can actually leverage that process to get into alpha brainwave mode really easily. So you can do it just like we did this just a minute ago. By refocusing through your breath, just settling down and taking a few deep breaths, maybe closing your eyes, maybe doing that tongue on the roof of your mouth thing, which in fact actually helps the bioelectric circuit of your body run through your body better, which is why you do that. Meditators and yoga people will know that. You can also just lay down. Laying down actually forces your body automatically to start going into alpha brainwave mode. Super easy. Another easy one, spacing out. Now you think, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be trying to be creative. Well, here's the thing. You don't have to try to be creative. You just have to relax yourself into a state so that you can actually allow yourself to be creative, because that's what you normally would do anyway. So spacing out is great. If you just kind of let your brain go out the window a lot of times, anybody get really great ideas when you do that? When you just all of a sudden look off and you're like, oh, that's exactly how I'm supposed to do so-and-so, right? It works. Daydreaming, same sort of thing. For all of you in domestic relationships, your partners will appreciate this. Mindless activity, like organizing things, washing the dishes, cleaning, sweeping, things like that. Things that are just kind of repetitive, mindless activity will help you get into alpha brainwave mode easily. Showers, our favorite thing. I actually talked to a guy once at a conference, and afterwards he came up after I did my talk, and he's like, I always get ideas in the shower. Sometimes I'll take showers like 5 times a day. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but it works for me. And I was like, hey, you know what? If it works for you, do it. Showers are great. Also, cross-channel movement. So a lot of times you hear about artists and other kind of creative types who say that they take walks. They take regular walks to get ideas. Well, one of the reasons this works is because of something called cross-channel movement. When your body does this kind of movement, where one side of it is doing the opposite thing from the other side, it actually makes your brain sync. The brain hemispheres sync with each other, and they communicate with each other better, which is why you get ideas when you walk. So, cross-channel movement is great. Laughter is really wonderful. And playing and having fun is really wonderful, too, for kind of sparking the right side of your brain and sparking creativity. Actually, there's a guy who's called the Laughter Guru. His name is Madan Kanteria, and I love this quote, that when you're being playful, you're activating the right side of your brain. The right side is unlimited, and you can do anything you want. And so a lot of times, sometimes when I need to get ideas for things, I'll make myself watch comedy. And I'll watch comedy shorts, and I'll just watch one after another. So I just start laughing, and I've actually had ideas come to me after I got done having a laughing fit. So the stuff actually really works. So instead of having this kind of, tortured, I'm trying to, be creative, and you feel like, you're doing the equivalent of trying to run an obstacle course just to come up with your idea, try relaxing, try intending alpha, and try to do that. Because when your brain is supposedly doing nothing, it's really doing a tremendous amount. So really work to intend alpha. That's one way of doing it. The other way is a little more whimsical. And we can talk about aid that we can get from the unseen. So there's a great book called So You're a Creative Genius, Now What? And the writer says, sometimes dabbling in mysticism can be a fun way to understand and solve a problem. So let's dabble in a little mysticism right now. So I'm going to tell you a little story of something that happened a long time ago when I was in my early 20s. So I used to live in a house that got turned into apartments, and down in the basement apartment lived this woman who was a single mom, and she had a little girl whose name was Natalie. Now, Natalie was 4 years old, and she was cute as a button, and somehow I met her, and then she took a shine to me, and so she would come, and she would knock on the door, and I'd open the door, and she'd say, "Do you want to play?" Why, no, so cute. So what was I going to say? No? Of course I want to play, which actually translated into more like babysitting, but I was okay with that. So she'd come upstairs, I'd get paper and pens and crayons and stuff, and I laid it all out, and we'd draw together. And so she drew a picture for me one day, and she gave it to me, and she was so proud, and she said, "Here, Denise, here's a picture." And I looked at it, and I looked at her, I looked at it, I was like, "Natalie, what is it?" And she said, "It's a chicken cave." And I was like, "It's it's like a cave for chickens?" She said, No, it's a chicken cave. I was like, "So it's a cave that's shaped like a chicken?" "No, it's a chicken cave." And we went back and forth a couple more times. I still to this day don't know what a chicken cave is. But I love the fact that she knew what it was, and that she had drawn a picture of it, and she felt that it was fit to give to me, and that it was perfectly valid concept. When's the last time you came up with an idea that was a chicken cave? Exactly. You never know. It could be the next best thing. So I say that we can take a page from children and maybe use our imaginary friends. And there are some imaginary friends that we can utilize to help kind of kickstart our creativity. The first one is to travel our own internal lands. So, like I was saying with the walking, you can actually also leverage this kind of concept that I got from a woman I understand is a writer, and she actually is based here in London. And what she did to get her ideas in the morning is she would take walks, and she would walk through the streets of London, and she would listen to the songs that were playing inside of her head. And she took those songs to be an indicator from her subconscious about the things that she needed to think about, or the ideas that her subconscious was trying to give her. And I was like, that's so cool. How many times do you have some random song running through your head? Like, a lot. Like, he was like, yeah, I do all the time. Like, so all of a sudden something will come up, and I'm like, and then it'll just stay with me. And sometimes, a lot of the times I ignore it, But every now and then I'll pay attention and I'll listen to it, and sometimes my interpretation of what the lyrics are or what it means to me actually is very relevant to what's happening in my life or some problem that I'm trying to solve. So you can travel your internal lands. Also, you can take that, like I said, as an indicator of your subconscious. Also, you can employ a genius. Now, a lot of times people think of genius and they think of like Einstein, right? But this kind of genius is more of the genius that the ancient Greeks used to use. And the Greeks thought of a genius as an attendant spirit that lived in the walls of the house of an artist. And when an artist was doing their work, the genius would kind of come out of the walls and like whisper to the artist and give it ideas and tell it how to shape and form their work. So we kind of like to think of your genius kind of like Dobby the house elf, right? And that you can have this kind of genius instead of trying to be a genius, that you actually have a genius, right? And so that your ideas aren't coming, you're not trying to come up with this amazing idea on your own, which is like a lot of pressure, right? Like it's got to be amazing. But if you kind of have this thing where it's like, I'm just listening to this other kind of thing that's telling me what the idea is, then there's not as much pressure. And then whatever it says, you're just like, I'm just a scribe. I'm just like the Sherpa. I'm just doing what they tell me to do. And I think that takes the pressure away from you. Another entity that we could use, fanciful entity that we could use, is a daemon. And the daemon they thought of, I think it was the ancient Greeks again, thought of a daemon as a divine something. And the way I like to think of a daemon is kind of like a creativity babblefish. So that it's like the little spokespiece for the gods, and that it is there kind of in your ear to whisper to you, to interpret what the gods say, and interpret it to you and tell you in a way that you can understand it. So I kind of like to think of having a daemon as well. And then finally, you can also call upon the muses. Now, when it was all said and done, there were 9 muses, but 9 is like way too many people to try to listen to. I say you should just try to work with the original 3 muses. And the original 3 muses were Memne, which was memory, Melete, which was practice or occasion, or Iode, which was voice. Now, muses were thought to be the true speakers for whom the artist was just a mouthpiece, and that they were thought to inspire artists and inspire people to do their best. So, having a muse is not a bad thing. So when I think of the Muse of Memory, I like to think of when you think back on all the times where you had an idea that was really good or that really inspired you. Or you think back on all of the things that have inspired you that maybe were outside of yourself, that other people have done. And you can take that and use that to inform the new thing that you're working on, have that inform your work. A lot of times, who keeps like a swipe file or like a file of things, like a kind of repository of things that inspire them so that you can go back and look at later? Anybody else? Yeah. So doing something like that also helps this kind of memory muse, right? That you have these regular things that you can look at and be like, oh yeah, that was a really great idea. Maybe I can take that and springboard off of that and do something else. Melete, or practice or occasion. So one thing that's really important about creativity, and like basically using it and building it like a muscle, is practice. Is being able to actually have a habit in place where you're coming back and you're working on your creativity all the time. And it doesn't have to be like you are sitting there and you're doing something for 2 hours, or you're like painting a painting every weekend or something. It could be something that you're doing in small increments. It could be 10 minutes of just capturing ideas, or making sure you take 1 photograph a day, or making sure you write 1 page of something in the morning. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it does have to be regular. And having that practice or occasion makes it so it becomes second nature, it becomes habit, it becomes reflex, right? Another thing, voice. So one of the things I like to think about with voice is that each of us have our own unique voice. Each of us has our own unique fingerprint, our own unique DNA. So whatever it is that you put into something creatively, and you can take something that's already been done by somebody and just do it slightly in your own way, and it will be different, right? You can't actually end up replicating anything that anybody's done. You can copy it, but you can't actually replicate it. So trying to do something in your own unique voice can be a muse for you as well. Also, now that we've got the daemon and the genius and the muses out of the way, we can also think about calling upon the spirit of the idea itself. One thing that I think is very interesting, I like to think of ideas as their own entities, and that the ideas want to take form. And a lot of times, actually, Elizabeth Gilbert has a great quote that says, "The world is being circled by ideas and creativity that wants to take form and be made manifest in the world, and it's looking for portals to come through." So there are ideas running around all the time, and a lot of them are flirting with you, seeing if you're like a good match for them, right? They're like, "How about you?" And they're like, "How about you? How about you? How about you?" Have you ever had a really amazing idea for something and you were about to launch it, or you were going to launch it, and then you found out that somebody else did pretty much the same thing, like right before you did? Has anybody had that? I've totally had that, right? My theory was that the idea was looking for a portal to come through, and it chose me plus a few other people, and the other people acted on it before I did. So that's another thing, too, is to give your ideas respect. One of the things I like to think of is that we're avatars for ideas, that ideas use us and not vice versa. It's not us coming up with the idea. The idea has chosen you to be the channel through which it comes through. And then what you do is you are in service to that idea instead of trying to mold it and shape it into something that you want it to become. You just listen to what the idea wants to become, and you do that. And when I say listen, I mean really listen. And then not only can you just listen to it, you can actually engage in a conversation with the idea. Now, I know this sounds kind of crazy, but it's true that there have been times when I was kind of trying to develop ideas for something, I would actually do this process. I would take a walk in the morning, and I would talk to the idea, and I would say, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" And it'd be like, and all the ideas that I came up with after I said, "What do you want me to do?" I was like, "Okay, I'll take that, I'll use that, I'll do that, I'll do that. What else?" And then I would get some more ideas, and I'd be like, "Okay, I'll use that, and use that, and use that." And I never questioned it, and it worked out great. I actually developed a lot of presentations that I do that way. So trust that the idea knows exactly what it wants to be, and that it also trusts that it knows that you are the right person for that idea. And don't question it, because trust is everything. And so that leaves us with the final thing. Now you get to choose. You could be distracted and do all of this stuff, and be hyper-connected and everything, and not really take the time to settle down and find your ideas and get into your creative zone. The choice is yours of how you want to use your brain power, right? Because you have this creative brain power, but you may not have been in the mode of really like tapping into it and really leveraging it as fully as you could. Creative flow, like I was saying, really lies in that in-between state, really lies in that place of settling down, getting into alpha brainwave mode and whatnot. And so I think that it's really time for us to kind of know who we really are, to know that we're creative, that our ideas matter, or the ideas that have chosen us matter, and that it's time for us to really reclaim our power, and that we can have this, instead of having this kind of great, truer, wiser, higher, more powerful, potentially disruptive form of creativity happening in the future, we can start to make that happen right now. I get inspired by this quote, and I feel like this is actually what makes me kind of move forward and want to do the work that I do, that creativity makes day-to-day experiences more vivid, enjoyable, more rewarding. And when we live creatively, boredom is banished and every moment holds the promise of a new discovery. Super important. So I say that if you feel a little out of touch with your creativity, know that it is waiting for you, that it misses you, and that you can leverage white space and leverage that in between to really reach it and really generate it and harness it, focus it, and do something really amazing. So, thank you. Okay, 3 more things to say, and I have a little bit of time, which is great. So, the first one is, some people have said, and I actually did a talk that was talking about this a couple of years ago, and one of the tweets was that one buddy said, "It sounds like a lot of pseudoscience to me." Trust me, I assure you, I love information and I love research, and I wouldn't tell you something that didn't have a basis. And you can't even see this. But there are, if you go to delicious.com/Denise Jacobs and put in creativity, you will find just about every article, of which there are actually, at this point, hundreds, that I use to support my research. Number 1. Number 2, I've written several articles on creativity, banishing your inner critic and reigniting your creative spark for A List Apart, and one for, old screenshot, one for Now Creative Bloq about enhancing creativity, and a newest one is on perfectionism and procrastination and how to break that loop. And finally, I wanted to tell you guys that I don't know if you noticed, but this piece of artwork has been hugely inspiring for me and has really kind of sparked me and kind of taken me forward in my creative journey. And the artist is Americo Morales, and he is the brother of Nivi Morales. And I wanted to show you guys, I actually had Nivi bring the original piece of artwork so you can see it. I'm so honored. They're actually letting me buy this piece of artwork, and I want to show you guys like the stuff that he does. I am incredibly inspired by Americo. As you can see, he has Down syndrome, and he is this amazing artist who has got this amazing sense of color and form and everything. And every time I think about him and think about him doing his artwork, I feel so inspired because he's not holding himself back or judging himself. He is just creating. And that's what I aspire to do as well. So I want to show you guys this really cool piece of artwork really quick, and then I'll come. So this is Nivi, his sister, who I got introduced. So beautiful and so cool, and I get to take this home with me. So yay. So if you guys want to know more about Americo, please come and ask Nivi about it. And I got a certificate of authenticity too. So super excited. Thank you, Nivi. Thank you. Yay. And also, Nivi just updated his website, so you can go to americomorales.net and look it out. So, if you want to connect with me, I'm at denisejacobs.com. And if you want to check out my new endeavor, it's The Creative Dose. Thank you very much.